Welcome. My name is Emeka Abe. I'm Leadership Greater Washington Senior Director of Programs. And on behalf of Leadership Greater Washington, I'm so glad to have you all here for this Lessons in Leadership program. Raise your hand if you're an LGW member. Awesome. Raise your hand if you're a PNC staff member. Fantastic. Raise your hand if you're a guest. Wonderful. Well, welcome all of you today. It's been a pleasure to partner with PNC for a number of years now on these programs where we bring in different leaders of organizations to hear about their journey and what they've gleaned from it. We will have time for Q&A at the end. So as you're listening to the conversation, please think about what questions you might have for our guest. So with that, it is a pleasure to introduce Jermaine Johnson, who is the Regional President of PNC Bank, and I will let you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Emeka. Thank you so much to the Leadership Greater Washington folks for being here today. This is our last series of our Lessons in Leadership for the summer. I brought you all out of the heat. I'll tell you, it feels like the Caribbean outside. Unfortunately, we don't have an ocean. There's like no breeze, but we appreciate you all being here today. And I have the pleasure of being here with Brett Schulman, who's my last target for the summer. I got to tell you, if it's anything like the conversation that we had earlier this week, we're in for a really good conversation, I think.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
No, absolutely. It's nice to have you. So normally I would open this series up. I would ask questions that are more about the person's background. I would start with, where are you from? How did you grow up? How many siblings do you have? But I'm not going to do that today. We're going to jump right to what I think everyone is here for, because you guys already know the story. What we really want to know is why food?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you had asked me, back in college, I would have never said that. And I had originally wanted to be an attorney, thought I wanted to be a lawyer, so no offense to the attorneys in the crowd, if there are any, but I interned at a law firm in college and realized that was not for me. And then went into finance and really loved it, was fascinated by how businesses were built, all the different paths businesses took to their successes. And then got to a point in my career where I had just gotten married, and my wife at the time said, "I hate Sundays at 6 o'clock." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I can tell you're getting in a bad mood because you have to go to work tomorrow." I said, "Well, you're right, and that's not a way to live." And I realized that the job I had sitting in front of all these screens, I was earning a good living, but what was my purpose? What impact was I making in this place we all live in for a point in time? And so that then translated into a startup that my wife had worked on with her mom. So my wife was always into healthy eating and taught me when we met how to turn over my barbecue sauce bottle and see the high fructose corn syrup and all the processed junk in it, and really changed the way I ate and taught me about ingredients and all that stuff, because she grew up eating very healthy and shopping. Her parents shopped at old co-ops even before Whole Foods existed. And so she had been working on a natural snack food company that I was helping with on the side. That got traction, and it said, we were like, okay, if we're going to make anything out of this, we need to leave our careers and really commit to this full time, which we did. And that company grew, and it got distribution in Whole Foods and Sam's Club, and it did it pretty well, but it was kind of like pushing a boulder up a hill. But I learned an incredible amount about business, and I was basically the de facto chief operating officer. And then we brought on a gentleman to be our CEO who had industry experience. He had been one of the early partners at Izzy Beverage. He was the CFO, and they had sold to Pepsi at the time, and we brought him on for industry expertise. And then we got to a point where me and the CFO kind of butted heads on strategy. And my wife was running sales and marketing. I was running operations and logistics and manufacturing. And I hadn't necessarily, when I left my finance career, believed that was going to be my future. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go figure out what I want to do myself, and we'll recruit someone to take over my day-to-day position. Mary, my wife, stayed in the business. And, as fate would have it, I got a call from someone I went to college with, a woman I went to college with, and she said, "Hey, Brett, have you heard of this restaurant called CAVA?" I said, I think so. She said, "Well, it's my cousin's restaurant. He's one of the founders, and they partnered with a customer to sell their dips and spreads they serve in the restaurant in a couple local Whole Foods." I was like, "Oh yeah, we bought the hummus." He said, "Well, that business is really struggling. Would you talk to my cousin? And they need help with that." I said, "Sure." So we talked. I met my now partner and co-founder, Ted, Zeno Christos, as well as Ike and Chef Dimitri. And they asked and said, hey, Brett, would you come on and help? At the time, they had the original CAVA Meze full-service restaurant in Rockville, and they had opened the second in Capitol Hill. And they said, listen, we partnered with a customer to do this business, but they're operating it. It's having a lot of challenges. Would you come on and help? They said, well, we can't pay you any money, but we'll give you a little equity stake in the business, a little sweat equity. And so I did that and got the business profitable pretty quick. And me and the guys hit it off. And they said, Brett, why don't you be our fourth partner in CAVA? We'd love for you to come on board. And I said, I love what you guys are doing. And have you ever thought about taking what we do in full service and in grocery and bringing this amazing food to the world?
Sure.
This food that is healthful, it's flavorful, it's satisfying. Man, you got to unleash the secret and bring it to the world. So it's kind of how I fell into food.
Okay. Well, I promise that we will get to the personal stuff. Trust me. I don't want to exclude that from the interview today. But before we go there, I had a similar conversation with my wife when I was at GE Healthcare Finance on Sundays. I would always I would get really antsy and apprehensive and really I got to go into work tomorrow. What was it about the culture that you had in finance that you wanted to change and to do something different?
Well, it was like, if you all remember, I'm old enough, the old Dunkin' Donuts commercial. It's time to make the donuts.
Yeah.
I felt like every day it was like time to make the donuts. And again, it was, I really loved what I was doing, but I was seeing, it's a little bit too analogous to AI right now, where I could see a lot of shifts happening in the industry. And the work I was doing was becoming increasingly commoditized, and it wasn't as value add. And I think that's personally what I was feeling in the time to make the donuts every day kind of idea. And so again, I wanted to do something that I could have a greater impact on the world around me. And when I met the guys, I think why we hit it off so much, they all had mothers who grew up in the restaurant industry, and the restaurant industry has certain stereotypes where they didn't have a lot to show for it. And so they had created that original restaurant, and the way they treated their team members, which I firsthand experienced when they had asked me to be their fourth partner. My wife and I went down to Capitol Hill without telling them and went to dinner there just to experience it and saw how well they took care of their team. And it was something where I think we had this common ground that we could build a business that not only had a great impact on the communities we served with the food we were serving, but could also create career paths for folks that may not have had a lot of other options, because the restaurant industry is one of the few industries where anybody can make a life for themselves. And we also recognize that it wasn't such a transitory industry anymore, a transitory job, that this was a career for people or a livelihood for people. So how could we really create a place that could do that and accomplish that while doing right by the guests we were serving?
Okay. So how long did you work in your wife's business? It was your wife and your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And what was the name of that business?
It was called Snickety Snacks.
Snickety Snacks.
Yeah. It was healthful snacks. And it actually wound up getting acquired by Utz of Hanover, the potato chip company. But it wasn't, an exceptional exit or anything like that, but we just learned a ton. And a lot of what I learned helped inform, I think, our success at CAVA. And it was, like I said, it was kind of like pushing a boulder up a hill. And I worked in that business for almost 5 years.
Okay.
My wife continued to work in it for a number of years after that.
And your biggest learnings in that business? I mean, what were the things? Point out a few things that you really learned that you took in your next journey to really look at CAVA or something much bigger? I
learned, I was a little hard-headed when I was younger, a little stubborn, and I needed to figure out, how to get my views across, I think, more constructively. Also, to continue to stay agile, to continue to be nimble, to continue to innovate. The world is not a static place. And don't be afraid to pivot and be decisive and kind of keep moving. Because I think at the time we had solid products, but I think the lack of evolving those products, I think, kind of got the business stuck in a certain place over time, where it never got that kind of momentum or velocity that we've been able to achieve at CAVA. And the CAVA journey has so many different moments of adversity and challenges, and I think that's so much about what business is. It's not so much about your success, it's how you meet those moments of adversity and overcome them, because they're inevitable. And as well as we've done now, they will continue to come and we will continue to face them.
Okay. Yeah. The name of the business again?
Snickety Snacks.
Snickety. I don't want to get it wrong. Okay, so you were at Snickety Snacks for 5 years.
Yeah.
How did the guys from CAVA, how did they find you?
I said a woman I went to college with.
Okay.
She is my partner Ted's cousin.
Ted's cousin.
Yeah, and said, hey, will you talk to my cousin?
And it was because of your experience at Snickety Snacks that they came looking for you?
Yeah, because we had experience with Whole Foods, which the CAVA products were in about 7 or 8 Whole Foods at the time, and understood consumer packaged goods, CPG, distribution. So I had experience in all that, and production and manufacturing. So they were looking, to get my advice and help on that. And I think that's like the beauty of, to me, life's journey is, it's so much about relationships and connections and the people you meet. And I'm living proof of it. I wouldn't be where I am today without the friendships I made in college or the connections that I made that then introduced me to eventually my future co-founders.
I think we have some interns in here today. Do we have interns? There we go. Yeah, when they're here, I always talk to them about, make sure you, you take advantage of the network that you're going to gain. That's
Yes.
one of the biggest parts of your experience for the summer is you're going to learn a lot here with PNC, but you also want to make sure that these are the folks that you're going to know throughout your entire career potentially.
100%.
Yeah. So you and your wife, the folks from CAVA, the woman that you knew in college, they reach out to you, you try their food one night.
Yeah.
And it was from that one night experience that you decided that you were going to make an investment to move forward with CAVA.
Well, I was working with the guys, righting the ship on the CPG business. And then when they asked me to be the 4th founder, going and experiencing the restaurant without any pretext, without them knowing I was going to be there. And it just confirmed what I had felt in working with them, that we viewed the world the same way. We had the same kind of aspirations and the impact we wanted to make. They've been amazing partners. I couldn't ask for better co-founders as we co-founded the Fast Casual. And they've been incredibly supportive for me. They joke that they hired their boss, in a sense. And it's not totally like that. I mean, we're equals.
Did they know they were hiring their boss?
Yeah, I think they did. Well,
they needed someone to help guide them a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the beauty is we all have complementary skill sets. So we're not kind of tripping over one another. And that they, I just so much appreciate that they entrusted me with a brand that they founded on their family's heritage in culinary. So very personal to them that they trusted me with that responsibility. And they've trusted me throughout a lot of decisions that they may not have agreed with over time. They said, we don't think this might be good, but we're gonna back you on it. We're gonna support you on it, and their support's been unequivocal.
So they're here. The founders are here.
Yeah.
You're here.
Yeah.
The first store that you have for CAVA opened up in Venice, California.
No.
Bethesda,
Maryland was our first location.
See, AI even gets it wrong. See,
that's right. That's why you can't trust it yet. No, well, Venice is a funny story, though. It's funny you bring that up because I have a picture of that restaurant behind my desk because it is the one location that we have closed before the lease was up. And we closed it 9 months into it, where we made a bad real estate decision. And I keep it as a reminder of being disciplined on real estate. And look, I'm very proud that that's the only one we've ever closed. We've closed one like Chinatown when the lease was up and the market had shifted and there was public safety issues at the time, but we'll probably be back in that market at a certain time when the arena is renovated. But we have not closed another restaurant before the lease was up, and that one serves as a very good reminder to stay disciplined and be patient on the right real estate because it's very important.
Yeah. So in the original, growth of the business, you got to 66 stores, I think, before you went public and before you bought Zoe's.
Before we bought Zoe's, yeah.
Talk to us about the geography. Talk to me about those first few stores. I mean, what were the learnings that you had in the early, growth period?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit about Zoe's because I think that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, that's where I got all my gray hair. We raised friends and family money. We had a lot of customers of the original restaurants who were approaching the guys and said, hey, we want to invest in your next full-service restaurant, because they had 2 at the time. And we got them all together at the original restaurant in Rockville. We closed for lunch. We mocked up the food. We showed them the business plan. We said, this isn't a full service, but we want to raise capital to open a couple fast casual locations and prove it out. So the idea was that we would open 2 to 3 to start, and then hopefully open a couple more, and that we would open them in a few different types of trade areas or neighborhoods to prove that this could work in different markets. So the first was in Bethesda. We actually had wanted our second and third to be in DuPont and Chinatown, but we couldn't find a good location or rent. And we had an opportunity to come up in Tyson's Corner Center. And then the third was actually in Columbia Heights. And then we had an opportunity in Tenleytown. So 4 very different types of neighborhoods and different kind of need states, we call them. So whether it was the component of office or residential, a mall. And we wanted to figure out how our food and our format worked in these different areas. And it worked pretty well. And we raised some more friends and family money to open a few more. And then we kind of grew to a point where we were around 11 restaurants. And we said, okay, let's now go to a new market. And we had the brilliant idea to have our new market, our second market, 3,000 miles from home in Los Angeles. And so we opened a restaurant in Los Angeles.
Who did you send in Los Angeles to manage that, the new restaurant?
Well, Ted wound up moving out there for a year, so that's where I'll get to it. So we opened one in Los Angeles. We thought we had 3 locations lined up. The other 2 leases never came to fruition. So we had this one location in Woodland Hills, a project called the Village of Topanga, open by itself. And I'm on the red eye like every other week out there, and it was a real struggle to operate. And so I went to Ted, one of my co-founders, who's also our chief concept officer. He leads all of our culinary innovation. And I said, will you move out there? And Ted did it. And he went out there with his now wife, who was his fiance at the time. And he helped get it fixed. And now Southern California, I think we have 34 restaurants, and it's an incredibly strong market for us. But it took a lot of perseverance and a lot of work to get that stable and then start to build upon it. And then, that's kind of been our story. And we learned a ton from that, right? You learn so much from your adversity. We learned what it took to stand up a new market. We learned what it took to operate in a very highly regulated state, especially, when it comes to...
you could have gone in New York, you could have gone to...
Well, New York's interesting, and we eventually went to New York, but Manhattan is its own market. It operates very differently from any other market in the country. And it's also a very expensive market. So we were a little gun shy about going into a market with those high rents as our second market. We wanted to kind of prove ourselves out more. But in retrospect, a lot of brands will do what's kind of called concentric circle expansion. So they'll just keep building out from their base. We went a little bit more of a shotgun approach. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but it just took a lot of grit and determination. And again, taking what we learned in LA and applying it to the next markets really helped us become more successful in those markets.
So how many of you know Zoe's?
Yeah.
Had you eaten at Zoe's? Do you like Zoe's? Okay. So tell me why you bought Zoe's and what was the expansion? I know when I read the story, I wasn't aware that Zoe's was one of your targets, and then ultimately you converted those.
Yeah.
But talk to us about that experience.
I think it was a little bit of craziness, a little bit of naivete. and a hypothesis that ultimately played out, but not before some blood, sweat, and tears. We're on this straight trajectory. We were 60-some restaurants going to 70 that year, 70 plus. We were getting a lot of accolades. We were, a hot growth brand on this very straight compass heading. And I had met a gentleman named Ron Shaikh, who was the founder and CEO for years of Panera. Yeah. He had sold that business in 2017. I had gotten connected to Ron when we had 2 restaurants. He became a personal passive investor on our Series A round in 2015. And then after he sold Panera, he created what's called his Act 3 fund. So it's basically his own family office investment fund. And when we were raising our Series D financing in late 17, early 18, he wound up leading that round. And so became a more meaningful investor in CAVA with our other existing institutional investors. Zoe's had approached Ron. They were a struggling public company. They were about 3 times our size at the time. And they had approached Ron about joining their board and helping engineer a turnaround. And Ron didn't feel like the team, the concept, et cetera, was really equipped to achieve that. And he had been an investor in us. And Zoe's had fashioned themselves as a Mediterranean brand, but they were kind of different from what we believed Mediterranean was. And we didn't necessarily view them as direct competition. But Ron came to me, we would have lunch every so often and said, they've approached me, I'm not going to do it, but what do you think about if we went to our investors and got the capital to acquire that company and give it to you and the team? I was like, well, that's a big idea. He said, because I think you all have what that business or that footprint needs. And it could be a way to accelerate expansion. And so I thought about it, and the two big theses that I really gravitated to, that I got excited about, was one, at the time we had raised a lot of private equity capital, and we were really mapping out our expansion plans and putting this capital to work. And we had really coalesced around what we called our Coastal Smile strategy. So this was back in 2017, and when we toured the country, I mean, we toured everywhere around the country, and what we would see is we'd land in the Carolinas or we'd land in Texas, and we'd see the airport being expanded, the highways being widened, the multifamily buildings going up. You could visibly see the growth and expansion. And you could see people migrating to the Sun Belt, population growth. And even back then, teleworking was starting to take hold more. And we also understood how well we were doing.
Maybe a little bit easier than California as well.
A little bit easier.
They like to eat
yes.
in the South.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we even saw back then, teleworking taking hold in our performance in the suburbs. So even back then, we were about 80% suburban. And we could see how well our economic model worked and how appealing our food was to a suburban customer and their needs. And we also knew that we had basically a half a dozen CAVA locations across or in the same center from a Zoe's location, doing twice the revenue. And then we saw that when we looked at the Zoe's portfolio, they had a lot of locations across from a Panera or Chipotle, again, doing half their revenue. So we felt like this was a very underutilized real estate that had very long leases at very affordable lease costs, signed 3, 4, 5 years ago. So we felt like this was a way to potentially accelerate our expansion if we could convert this real estate and unlock the dormant value in that real estate. And we also saw from our learnings in Los Angeles and some of these new markets that when we got to a certain critical mass in a market, the market started to accelerate. So if we were able to open 3 to 5 units in a 12-month period, it was definitely advantageous for us than stringing out opening units over a longer period of time. So you could create that critical mass both from a consumer awareness standpoint and an operational integrity standpoint. So here was a way to accelerate that, right? You could open multiple, half a dozen units within a year. And we were trying to sign locations, and we were looking in cities like Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta, and we were struggling to find 3 or 5 locations that we could sign and open within a year. And sure enough, the kind of crown jewels of the Zoe's real estate portfolio, they had great real estate in Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston. So this was a way to really accelerate our footprint in a very desirable part of the country. And then secondarily, what's really played out is we believe scale was going to matter more than ever in our industry. That technology was a big driver of it, and that scaled brands that had the required resources to invest in relevant differentiated technologies to create those unique customer experiences as well as have the operational insights were going to be brands that were like the haves, and the have-nots were going to be brands that weren't able to do that were going to be relegated to more commoditized out-of-the-box solutions, let alone the scale and business model resiliency to withstand COGS and labor pressures. So cost of goods pressures and labor cost pressures, which absolutely have accelerated in recent years. And I think you've seen that play out where we're very proud that over the last few years, we've been able to underprice CPI by 800 basis points with our menu pricing, really trying to pass along that value to our guests and create a more compelling offering for our guests while paying 75th to 95th percentile to our team members in most markets. So again, that's played out. What didn't play out as expected.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what were the sore spots?
Yeah, there were a lot.
Yeah.
Was the Zoe's business was in more distress than we even saw in due diligence. And
it typically is.
There's always skeletons in the closet.
There's always a reason someone wants to sell.
Yeah, exactly. And so the business really started to decelerate and fall off a cliff by the time we got change of control, which was the day before Thanksgiving in 2018.
Wow.
And so, people always ask me, man, navigating the pandemic, that must have been the hardest year of your career. And I say, actually, no, 2019 was the hardest year of my career. And because it was very difficult, because we had acquired this company and we had put a cap structure in place, believing a certain amount of EBITDA production from that company we were acquiring, and that EBITDA was rapidly disappearing. So it kind of blew a hole in our balance sheet that we had to plug.
So was the idea when you bought Zoe's, were you going to maintain and sustain the brand?
No,
Or
it was
always a convert at some point?
Yeah, it was always a convert, but we needed to maintain and operate it until we could convert it. And all of a sudden, immediately, it became all hands on deck, trying to triage and stabilize Zoe's from kind of bleeding CAVA out. Because the Zoe's business, as I said, we counted on this EBITDA we had acquired, just kind of operating the business just at the same rate. And now that rate was declining rapidly, so that EBITDA that we were going to be helping fund the conversions was disappearing.
I think you used a metaphor around an ice cube.
Yes. We knew it was a melting ice cube. We just needed to make sure it didn't turn into a puddle of water, and it was rapidly turning into a puddle of water. Yeah. And so, is again, this is what I talk about with moments of adversity. It became an incredible learning lesson for us. I joke, I got a PhD in business that year. And it also validated a lot of the things we were doing at CAVA. We did this barnstorming roadshow with all the operators the first week we took over the business. We did 6 cities in 7 days, getting all the operators together and hearing from them, why are you struggling? What's going on? And we heard so much valuable information, and the kitchen was too complex. There were all these things that had been happening that really complicated and kind of broke operations. So it was really kind of simplify and focus. Zoe's had at the time 276 ingredients in the kitchen, a third of which weren't cross-utilized. At CAVA, we have 83 ingredients that go into all 38 items on the line.
Tariffs. 276 ingredients, all sourced from where?
All over the place. And you had, they were making, I always, just as an example, they were making, they had an item called Yaya's cake. This great chocolate cake, it was delicious. But they were making it from scratch at 250 restaurants. Oh my God. So there was eggs, there was butter, there was cocoa powder, and all these ingredients. And so if you didn't have a team member that had worked there for 4 years that knew how to make this cake right, it either had crusty icing, it had melted icing, or it wouldn't even be in stock because they couldn't demand plan for it. So that was just one small example. So we worked with a value-add provider to re-engineer the cake and make it for us. And what happened? The customer loved it. It was always in stock. It was consistent, and it sold more. Just little things like that to simplify the operations and be able to deliver quality at scale. So we got the business stabilized. And the fascinating thing is, and this kind of goes to why we always focus on long-term strategy, which is, we are very much aware that when we went into the public markets, that kind of pushes against long-term thinking. But we tried to set ourselves up to be insulated from that short-term mindset. Is a lot of the things we had invested in before the pandemic, all of our digital order investments. We built our own digital order ecosystem. We put second production make lines for digital order in every restaurant in 2015. So when, the pandemic drove this massive shift to digital, we were ready for it, and we were prepared for it, for contactless ordering, all this. And then the acquisition of Zoe's itself, the suburbs and the Sun Belt. Where did everybody go during the pandemic? And then the pandemic didn't quite hit as bad down south, right? So, there was more mobility.
People were still outside.
People were still outside, moving around.
Going to restaurants.
And so what happened is, after kind of getting, punched in the face for the first 6 weeks, and people started to realize that they could have a great meal at CAVA in a very contactless, safe way, focusing on our team member safety. Both the businesses really rebounded pretty quickly, and then we were able to kind of grow out of that and gain market share. So it was, again, a lot of those long-term investments paid off in those moments of adversity.
So from the very beginning, you had investors. At some point, you went to private equity. Tell us about that experience. How hard is it to access private equity? And then once you have it, what does it feel like from a management standpoint of, short-term versus long-term goals, going out and buying Zoe's? I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on you at that point to make sure you were generating the cash flow that you need to generate. Yeah, I think, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about this. I think, listen, if you have a good business, you have a great brand, I think capital usually finds you. You'll get the calls. I think the most important thing and the most difficult thing is, who do you then partner with? And I always say the question, I think the question you want to ask yourself is, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because that has a big determination on who you partner with. Do I want to build something to then sell it and let somebody else scale it? Do I want to build something that's generational and this is the only thing I want to do? Because different investors have different outcomes themselves.
Some are investing from a fund that has a 5-year return that they then want to get their liquidity and move on to the next investment. Some, which we're fortunate to have at our table, are more evergreen, more long-term. So, for example, 2 of our larger minority investors, one is Invis out of New York. They've been our investor for 10 years, and they're still a holder. They've sold some publicly, but they didn't sell any until we went public, and they still hold a good piece of the business. And then Ron himself is a very long-term investor. He continues to be an owner of the business. And then even our shorter-term oriented investors stuck with us. And I think we had a really interesting, great eclectic group of minority investors that together became a majority, but it was a very diverse group where you had some that were very classic kind of profit-oriented investors, some that were a little more growth-oriented investors. So it always created this healthy tension, I think, in the boardroom that really delivered great outcomes and really good pressure-tested outcomes.
But when they invested, I mean, they were investing in you, especially early on. I mean, the concept really hadn't played out. You didn't have nearly the amount of stores that you have today. I mean, the food is great, but ultimately they were making an investment in you and what they thought you could bring to the success of the growth of the company.
Yeah, I think that's completely true for any investor. Is ultimately they need to like the opportunity. They need to believe in the white space opportunity and the product you have and the brand you're building. But ultimately they're betting on the people. Because like I said earlier, every business will face a rainy day. It will face adversity. And so is the team equipped to be able to deal with that and constantly evolve the business to the needs of the ever-changing world, whether it's a challenging moment or whether it's consumer preferences and behaviors changing. The world's not a static place. So are the people able to do that and able to build a team, build a culture, and nurture that culture to what's required to have a successful outcome?
So tell us a little bit about you. This is the part that everybody was yawning about when I first got started. I wanted to learn more about you. So where are you from? Where do you go to school? What do you study?
Yes, I was born in Philly, so don't hold it against me. I do like the Philly sports teams, but I also love my DC teams. I moved down here right before starting high school. So, and my father was in the car business all of his life, and he had an opportunity.
On what side? Sales side or manufacturing?
Sales, and then he had an opportunity to buy into a dealership here. It was actually called Schulman Buick. It was in Bethesda. There's a CVS there now. But, my father had a huge impression on me because he was an incredibly hard worker. My parents got married very young. They passed away. Both of them have passed away since. I appreciate that. But they got married when they were 18. They had my sister, about a year later. They had me about a year after that.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were married for over 55 years before they passed. But I watched my dad. He wasn't home all the time when I was young because he was working really hard to support us. And then they worked his way to be able to buy into a dealership, and then started to have some real success. So I got to see that success as I was in high school. But then, if you all remember in this area in the late 80s, the savings and loan crisis, the recession hit, and he lost it. And then GM changed all their car lines to be the same kind of look and feel, and so GM sales went down. Buick had troubles, and he lost the dealership. And I saw my parents had to file for bankruptcy, and I had to take out loans to work my way through college and wait tables, and again, incredibly formative learning experiences that helped me be who I am today, that I learned from. But I saw my father never quit. And he always just kind of picked himself up and kept working, where he eventually worked himself back and worked for a public company called Group 1 and had a very successful career there. So that really had a big impression on me. And also living down here, we had moved down here in high school, and I loved the area. When they told me they wanted to move from Philly, I really started to make good friends up there in middle school, and I'm like so upset. But I walked into high school not knowing one person. But now I still have very close friends from high school, and I love this area, and that's why we founded our business here. We didn't move our business from here, even though it's not known as like a restaurant, corporate headquarter kind of town. But I love the area, and really happy to be able to make the impact we've made from a business standpoint in the area. I have a beautiful wife of almost 23 years and 3 wonderful children.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have 2 older daughters. One's down in at UVA in Charlottesville. I have a younger daughter who's going to college this fall. She'll be at UT Austin.
Excellent.
Yeah, so a Longhorn. And then we have a son who's 13 years old. So he'll be an only child for about 5 years. So.
And away from his sisters.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you stayed close to home. You went to the University of Maryland.
I did. I'm a Terp.
And what did you study?
I studied criminal justice. I thought I wanted to be an attorney. Yeah.
Behavioral and social sciences.
Yeah, and that's actually a big part, I think, of what I've taken into my professional career is a lot of the psychology classes and the behavioral social sciences classes is fascinating because I joke if I went back to college, I'd probably be a psych major. Because it's really, leading an organization, trying to build a culture of business, it's really trying to understand people better. And me evolving as a leader, I joke that I've had to reinvent myself 4 times as a leader. Once as a startup leader, a growth company leader, a private enterprise company leader, and now a public company enterprise leader. And they're 4 completely different roles.
What's the most difficult?
I think it was probably the jump from growth to private enterprise. Because, and that happened in a very compressed time frame, buying a company 3 times our size. I wasn't afforded the normal time and evolution of learning that change and that transition, because you go from kind of a group of people working in a room, making all your decisions together, to having to influence outcomes through many degrees of separation of people. And it's just a totally different way of thinking. It's a different way of managing. It's different how I spend my time. So that was a really tough adjustment, and then required different people. I think the hardest thing is understanding that, it's funny, I talk to my kids about this and how they're thinking about going into the workforce is, one of the things is some people are very happy and very well-oriented working in a small company. Some people thrive in a larger company. And they're just different organisms and different animals. I think figuring out where you thrive, you succeed, what you like to do, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's where you find your skills, your competencies, really where do they resonate, where do they work really well. And so making that leap required me to make a lot of tough decisions where some folks maybe didn't understand it for themselves, and I had to make the decision for them, and it was very hard. Very hard. Good people, but they were struggling to meet the needs of the business, and if I didn't make those decisions, the business would ultimately fail and suffer. And it's the hardest part about the job.
So when you talk about making that transition, at what point did you decide that you were going to go public? I mean, you're going from privately held company, you've got full control. Now to becoming a public company, that's a much different animal.
And I think our success in going public is very much attributed, certainly to our team, but also having the right investor alignment and folks around the boardroom. Because in 2021, as things were opening up and the public markets were opening up and things were rebounding, the public window, they call it per se, was wide open. And if you remember, there were a lot of SPACs and everybody was going public. Probably a lot of companies that shouldn't have gone public.
We did one too.
Everybody went public.
We don't have it anymore.
There's a few of those out there. And so our board said to us in a board meeting, to me and my CFO, hey, what do you guys think about going public? And we looked at each other, we're like, we're not ready. We just don't think we're ready. We're capable. And if you had investors who really needed liquidity, were seeking liquidity, they probably wouldn't have asked. They probably would have just said, hey, okay, now it's time. We think we should do this. And so the next question was, okay, well, if you were to go public, what would you need to improve, or what would give you that confidence? And he said, come back and think about it and talk to us. And it was a great question. And so we created a whole list of things that we need to do, whether it was, bringing on upgrading our controller position to a chief accounting officer, doing kind of a internal controls audit, working with operations to get much more consistent performance across the fleet. So we felt like we had very structured kind of process in place to deliver very consistent.
It's kind of like selling your house. It's like, what do I need to do in order for me to maximize on the sale?
Yeah, get it
right, get it ready.
Cleaned up, fixed up, right? Shored up, fix anything that's broken or not operating or working how it should. And so we would revisit this conversation at every subsequent board meeting. And then I think it was it was spring, summer of 22. They said, how do you all think about it now? And we said, actually, we think we're in a good spot. We had visibility also to getting to the completion of the Zoe's conversions. And one of the things we did also that helped inform that, I think one of the things that was also effective is I engaged with public participants throughout our CAVA journey. So even going back in the 2016, 15, 16, 17, I was meeting with public investment bank restaurant analysts and getting to know them, getting to know the story. In 18 and 19, I met with some public investors. I did like a small roadshow, hearing from them how they thought about the business. And then in 2021, when we did our Series F, it was kind of like a pre-IPO type round. We met with 50 public investors, and T. Rowe Price and Cap Group actually invested in that round. So again, I started to get a lot of exposure to how public investors and participants were thinking about our industry, our business. And then it also helped to create relationships and credibility, because we said, oh, here's what we're going to go do. We're going to convert these Zoe's locations. And then I come back and say, okay, here's what we converted. Now here's what we're going to go do. So in 2022, we did what's called a non-deal roadshow. So we met with 55 different accounts, again, giving them an update on the business, hearing how they thought about it, what they were focused on. And it's always, to me, it was kind of good kind of workout muscles in being a leader and understanding, is there something I'm not thinking about that I should be thinking about with the business, and the P&L and how they're looking at this, and just their historical knowledge of the industry and what they've seen work and not work, and how that informed our decisions. So by the time the roadshow came around and we were confident that it was ready to go public, and we started to do the public company roadshow, I'd go into a room and I had a lot of these investors I had existing relationships and credibility with. So I think that was very helpful in having their confidence to invest in the IPO. And then one of the best things we did was these mock earnings calls. So for 6 quarters, I think, we did mock earnings calls, we did mock press releases. And again, we started to operate like a public company, whether we were going to go public or not. So by the time we went public, all of these processes and timelines, they were already in place. And it wasn't like a shock of changing how we operated the business. We had all these timelines, when we would start the earnings script, when we would start all these things. So it was just all already on the calendar. So it was just kind of business as usual.
And the targeted raise amount was?
It was about $300 million.
And what did you ultimately raise?
I think we raised ultimately about close to $400 million.
All right, Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna open it up to the audience. I'm sure we have plenty of questions. Wow.
You want to call on people?
Sure. We'll call on a PNC person first. Nancy Bonnell.
So biased. Nancy Bonnell, PNC. Big fan of the restaurant, both of them. So I don't think I heard you say this, but I think you kind of got to the point where you met at the Rockville restaurant with the new concept. But what was the catalyst to decide to go fast casual versus expanding, on the full service restaurants like you do in Olney and obviously Rockville and here in DC?
Yeah, so it's really interesting when I was meeting, I actually had this feedback from an investor when we were doing our initial friends and family raise. And he posed a question to me. He said, how many restaurants from the Washingtonian Top 100 list from 10 years ago can you name? And I was like, that's a good question. And a lot of them closed. Full service dining, as we're currently seeing in DC especially, is a very tough industry. And it's very hard to scale that model. But the main thing was that as I brought the idea to the guys, is I believe that this was food that should be kind of democratized. This amazing Mediterranean cuisine, this unique cuisine where taste and health unite, should be accessible to everyone all the time. And you can only go out to so many full service meals, right? And so many people can afford that kind of meal, even though the full service restaurants are are affordably priced. And that also, consumer behavior was shifting. And you could even see it. I mean, now it's even become more apparent where in the restaurant industry, casual dining as a segment is shrinking, and fast casual continues to grow, because it's just a format and a model that's able to deliver a very relevant value proposition to a consumer. So we felt like fast casual was this amazing format and vehicle to be able to deliver this food to the world and more frequently, and have people access it more frequently.
Hi, Bettina, he knows me. I own Chaya Tacos, also at Fast Casual, much smaller than CAVA, but we've known each other for a while, and he's a great mentor on levels. I have a question about what your feelings are on AI moving forward.
Yeah, I think AI has so much promise and so much potential, but also so much potential downside and risk to it. And I always frame it, and we think about this even with automation and AI, I like to say technology to enhance the human experience, not replace it. Our mission is to bring heart, health, and humanity to food. If we were all robots and AI, I don't know whether we would be delivering on that humanity aspect. And in fact, we are...
I'd love to hear that, by the way. We don't want to be replaced either.
No, I don't want to be replaced. I'm hearing about AI CEOs. And we're investing in our dining rooms, et cetera, but one example is we're testing in 4 restaurants. We're going to expand it to 18 restaurants. Is testing camera vision and generative AI over our serving line. So this detects how much food's being depleted from the serving pots. It cross-references it with real-time sales data, historical sales data, weather data, and event data, and then projects to our grill cook, here's how much chicken to be cooking right now. Or our team, here's how much food to be prepping in the back of house. So we're seeing it mitigate food waste, mitigate out of stocks, and then take that complexity out of our team members' mind share so they can focus on great food and great hospitality, right? Free them up to deliver that great human connection. So we try and think about it like that. I mean, we really, when we break AI into 3 buckets, it is restaurant efficiency. We think it can be used to really get to a point where the system is truly, we have suggested ordering and suggested scheduling, which is kind of analog 1.0 automated suggested tools, but getting to a very granular specific place where they're scanning the physical inventory and the system just orders very accurately for them. Using AI and using menu mix data and all this, 4-week trend data, weather data, all that. So I think restaurant efficiency is one big territory. I think marketing and personalization, so we've been investing heavily in our loyalty program, really creating one-to-one lines of communication and connection, and understanding your specific unique behavior as a guest so that we can surface the most relevant content to you to create a more valuable experience for you and ultimately the business. And then third is really business intelligence and insights at a corporate level. Just fascinating analysis we just did on even using AI and using prompt engineering to look at how our DoorDash menu is optimized. And it was mind-blowing what it spit out and every specific item and how we could shift tags or shift the order of things to improve the optimization by 18% on the menu. And you think about it would have taken people on our team hours, if not days, to kind of try and do up that analysis, and that was done in like 5 minutes. So you think about the productivity enhancements, and I say, yes, AI will potentially mitigate the need for new hires or potentially eliminate some more administrative jobs. But I think the power is going to lie in the people that understand how to leverage it and use it to make themselves more powerful and productive. And then there's, look, the real question is, will it ever achieve the divine spark of imagination? Because AI is kind of looking backwards at all the data and IP that exists in the world and synthesizing it. But is it going to create kind of that new imagination and IP that people don't always know they want?
Thank you, Brett. Really, it's a master class on entrepreneurship, so I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
I'm a recovering entrepreneur myself, having sold my company.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the different stages of your leadership, from startup to growth to private to public. Do you consider yourself self-taught?
No, I mean, I feel like everyone around me has taught me. My experiences have taught me. I'm learning every day. I'm still learning. I've never run a company this big before. So I'm pushing myself, to keep up with it, right? And what do I need to learn? And how do I seek? And I speak to people all the time. I was just able to, I've got Ron around the table who's obviously kind of climbed the mountain we're trying to climb. I was able to speak with Gene Lee the other day, who's the recently former CEO of Darden, who's a phenomenal public company CEO, and just getting that insight and perspective, what worked for him, what did he think about, all that. So I'm trying to just be a sponge, absorbing everything around me all the time. And then, reading and understanding what's working for some companies and others. And again, I don't ever try and take anything verbatim because I think that's a dangerous thing to do, because every company is unique. It's its own organism. It's got its own heartbeat. But what works and what doesn't work for other companies, what do I get inspiration from that? And then how does that translate to our company? Or what does that mean to our company? So I'm always trying to absorb that information, and then the wisdom of those around me and the people that I've been fortunate to be able to be connected with.
Hi, my name is Daniel Kahn. I'm an intern in CNIB here. I have a question. So I know you started off with Deutsche and other firms early in your career. I would love to hear a little bit more about that time in your life, and what transferable skills did you learn there to instill the confidence to work at Sickety Stack and start a brand, essentially?
Yeah. Well, I think it also goes back to my friends growing up. A lot of them became fairly successful entrepreneurs in different industries, whether it was real estate or things like that. And I'm over in the corporate world. I'm like, well, I know these guys. I'm one of them. Like, why can't I do that, right? So it gave me a little bit of that confidence. But in the finance career specifically, I think I mentioned it earlier. It was fascinating to me, and to be able to see how so many businesses had different paths to success. And so when we were creating the original model for the fast casual, we looked at counter service, walk the line model. It really, that helped me inform and understand how to look and think about how we were going to construct the business. So all of that learning on how businesses worked and operated, I think, helped inform me to grow the business. And then the other thing was I went through 2 mergers. I was originally Alex Brown.
Okay.
And then we got
Baltimore?
Yeah, I joke that if there was this old law called Glass-Steagall that they repealed that allowed commercial banks, those of you in the banks,
Yes.
commercial banks to merge with investment banks. And I joke, if they didn't repeal Glass-Steagall, I might still be at Alex Brown. But that really changed the industry. And then we went
We
through
didn't do it well back then, and we still don't do it well today. We actually let them run apart. The
Right.
bank on this side, the investment bank on that side.
these one-stop shops. So went through the Bankers Trust, Deutsche Bank merger, and then they wanted to move us from Baltimore to New York. And at the time, I was dating my now wife, and I didn't really want to move to New York at the time. And so that I wound up taking a job at Freeman Billings Ramsey down here. But that really was the beginning of the changing of the industry, and I think my outlook towards the industry. But I think the finance world, it helped me understand how businesses were built. And it also now, fast forward 10 years, helps me as a public company CEO. I lived that world. I was on the other side, but I knew that language. I knew that the mechanics of that world, working in that world, capital markets, all of it. I was very fluent in it, and frankly, I enjoyed it. I found it fascinating because a lot of folks cautioned us on going public and said, oh, you don't want to be a public company CEO, it's miserable, this and that. And I said, I understand there's challenges that I don't have to deal with as a private company, but I don't mind some of the engagement that can be a chore for some others. I really love getting the word out about our business and telling everyone about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, engaging stakeholders, and especially now that our customers or average consumers can be owners of the brand, because they've been asking for that for years. And so for people to be able to have ownership in the brand they love is a really awesome thing.
Hi, thanks for being here. Can you share with us a little bit about how you address some of the talent challenges? I mean, the Columbia Heights store is a great example. Like, people there are dozens of employers, and lots of people in the fast food industry and in retail are really struggling to keep from having a revolving door. So what are some of the tools that you've used? And you alluded to it early, that you want to create a career pipeline for some folks in a field that doesn't typically happen. So we'd love to hear some of how you do that.
Yeah, it's the most important thing in our business. Our general manager position is the single most important position in the business. And we work at this every day, and you got to compete every day. And I think we've tried to build this over time, embedded into our business model. So even going back to 2016, we went to the board. This was back when minimum wage and average wages were like $9, $10 an hour in a lot of markets. And we said, we want to take our national starting wage to $13 an hour. We want to be this employer of choice. We want to make sure we pay our people well. And we showed some math on how it could drive down turnover, and that saves money and kind of pays for itself. And it all played out. And we had a very supportive board, whether it was on the actual wage side or the benefits side, to constantly invest in our team members and have that built into our economic model over time. So now we're able to pay 75th, 95th percentile in some markets. So that's kind of on the team member side and have these benefits. I think stepping back, most importantly, is the culture. Ultimately, people work for companies that they feel care about them and support them and have their back. And that is not a set and forget. You have to work at that every day, all the time, to continue to show your team why you care about them and how you care about them. And it can be everything from the things we do to make our restaurants easier to run. I go around to our restaurants, and when I visit, at the end of the visit, I say, I have a magic wand. I can grant you 3 wishes. What 3 wishes would make your lives easier at CAVA, that would just make your day so much better? And I remember after the pandemic, and mobility, we were able to get out more. People love our pickled onions. And our team would say, Brett, people love our pickled onions, but our arms are really tired from slicing all these onions. I'm like, we're on it, we got it. And so we worked with our produce supplier to get vacuum sealed pre-sliced onions that didn't dehydrate, so it wouldn't diminish the quality of the food, so they're no longer slicing those onions. And so we just relentlessly do that throughout the kitchen, so they see us listening to them, working on their behalf, trying to make their lives better. And then hiring great leaders that care about them, that take care of them, because ultimately I'm not in those restaurants every day. So if Columbia Heights doesn't have a great general manager, it doesn't matter what I say here, it's not going to translate. So one of the things we've done is really invest heavily, and we are continuing to build out kind of our future program, because as we accelerate and open 60, 70, 80 restaurants a year, it's a lot of general managers we have to hire, and the best way to succeed is have that be internal promotes. So how do we build this team member to GM developmental pipeline and make sure we're equipping them with the skills? We're doing behavioral interview guides, personality assessments, and have these training programs and processes in place to make them successful business leaders. Because the cool thing about our business is somebody coming in off the street, if they've got the will and can develop the skill in 24 to 36 months, they can be making 6 figures plus running a multi-million-dollar business. And that's the promise for us, for the GM. But it is making sure that culture is nurtured and protected, and then hiring right people, and don't let bad operators in your house, because a bad operator will take down a restaurant very quickly, and making people feel like you have their back. And it's a lot of different ways. It's we just did this CAVA Connect conference where every 18 months we bring all of our general managers from across the country for 3 days of education, recognition, celebration. It's our values cards in the back of our restaurants. We have communication boards, and we have values cards that people can hand out to one another to recognize when somebody's exhibiting a passion for positivity or constant curiosity, or they're acting with agility, or collective ambition, or generosity first always, which are our 5 values. And so again, you're reinforcing these ideas because you're creating kind of a set of organizing principles, because you want people to understand that if I was rude to another team member, that would feel weird here. That's just not how we show up. So you got to really build that system over time and continue to invest in it and nurture it.
Well, Brett, thank you for these lessons of leadership.
Yeah.
We learned a lot today. We're very lucky to have you here in our region.
Yeah, thanks for hosting me.
No, absolutely.
Appreciate the conversation.